Boy oh boy, MangaKamen is talking about vivziepop's work again. We better beat him up in the comments! Yeah, that's just a regular Tuesday for me. Hazbin Hotel has finally been released. After 10,000 years, it's finally free to conquer the internet. And boy oh boy, it alongside a game of monsters and guns that I refuse to talk about are pretty much the talk of the town. Sure, I'm a little late, but I wanted to give the series a little more breathing room before I actually did a full-on analysis of it. Now that we have about 6 episodes under the series' belt at the time of my scriptedness, I think it's time we talk about the show and be a little critical of it since it has some breathing room. I do want to stress that for the most part, I do enjoy the show, but as a critic, I often have to put aside my biases, either that or they're just prevalent as my likes, so it's almost like a cross-counter of emotions that I have at times. Do I recommend Hazbin Hotel? Well, if you like crude humor, good animation, and what is essentially a more cursed-filled version of The Good Place, then I'd say it's up your alley. If you have any interest in watching the show and don't want to be spoiled, this is your last chance to get into it blindly because I do intend on talking about the series and there will be a basic level of knowledge of it that I will talk about. Also, a few spoilers for other media I'm going to bring up as comparative pieces in this, so heads up on that. Still, let's begin, shall we? I'm MangaKamen, and welcome.
Everybody do the Michigan ride. Everybody likes the Michigan ride.
Now, this is the biggest issue I have with the show. The pacing. Pacing for a show is very important, since it allows the audience to watch the events unfold and allows us to digest the events. A good pace will allow the audience to see a story in a much more intimate light. Meanwhile, a bad pacing can either be too fast, and time between events doesn't really translate well with things supposedly taking off screen to fill up the gaps, or there's the snail pace where you spend too much time on the day-to-day elements. This isn't like a Persona game where you meticulously plan out who you want to hang out if you want to show up at one of your many jobs you inexplicably got.
Real?
Now which one does Hazbin Hotel fall into? After all, I'm being negative in this video, so obviously I have to talk about it. Before that, I want to point out that this is all just subjective interpretation on the events, as well as what my experience in this sort of storytelling are going to be. If I find this to be a flaw and you don't, that's to be expected because the pacing issues aren't going to be as more defined as, say, if a piece of lore that was actually breaking the continuity comes up. If I find that the pacing of the show is a bit too fast, I can only speak for myself in that regard. If you agree, good. If you disagree, also good. All I ask is that you hear my reasoning for why I think the pacing is a bit too fast. First episode, after we learn about the extermination happening 6 months because of an angel being killed, it's only 5 episodes later that we learn the extermination is taking place in 1 month. So you're telling me that it's been a month for each episode? Then there's also the angel's death. Now, one thing I do enjoy about the first episode is that it has a setup to a mystery as to who could have killed the angel. Personally, before watching the third episode, I thought it could have been Alistair who did the deed. The idea wouldn't be too far-fetched, since I could see Alistair being strong enough to kill an angel, and if he could get into heaven somehow, he could raise hell in heaven. That was something I had in mind. But no, it's a character who we didn't know about until episode 3, Carmilla Carmine.
Who the fuck are you? I don't know any of you knew.
Well, there goes that tension and any mystery around who could have killed the angel. It's a character who doesn't really have anything to do with the main cast save for Alistair and Serpentius. And getting back to episode 6, it really feels like that with everything that happens in that episode, this should have been a season finale where it draws the attention with a lot of revelations. That the angel's extermination was being carried out in secret, that angels didn't know how people should go into heaven, that Vaggie.
Actually, it's pronounced Vaggie.
No.
Is a fallen angel. It's a bit much and should have been saved for the end of the season. And yes, I did mispronounce Vaggie on purpose. Lucifer's episode, which while entertaining, I guess this universe, Johnny lost that bet. Introduced the father issues that Charlie has with him, and then they just seem to fade away into the background because of this episode. Angel does turn around. Like, I'm glad he's developing, but the most you could say that really had any actual effect on him would be Husk's song, and that's pretty much the only thing that could have done actual work on changing Angel Dust. These are only a few of the things I take issue with the pacing that we're dealing with. It's like, Viv, can you slow down? Slow down, Viv. Look out! You hit Oprah. The biggest problem with this is the pacing messes with the conflict and resolution, and even more so since there's a lot more telling than showing happening here with the story. Take, for example, Carmilla. There's nothing really about this character when she's introduced, and I don't really have any actual time to care that she's the one who killed the angel. In a story that actually wanted to keep the tension, they would have introduced her earlier, allow the audience to get to know her as a character, then drop the revelation that she killed the angel. Now, an easy counter to this is that she killed the angel to protect herself and her family, and that's a relatable motivation, I will admit. But it really comes out of nowhere with the character. I don't know much about this character, and I certainly am not invested in her, so to find out that she's the one who killed the angel, I'm more or less left disappointed. I'll get into this more later on, as I'm trying to keep away from comparative analysis with this aspect of Hazbin, and then I'll have to go into spoilers from an unrelated series, but keep this in the back of your head. Although that's another issue. The characters. And I'm not referring to the writing, rather I'm referring to the number of characters. It's almost like every single episode there would be at least 1 or 2 new characters introduced, aside from the main cast of the 6 from the get-go. Does Serpentis count as one of the main cast now? Will they make it 7 then? I'm not saying we can't have an expanding cast or minor characters, but a lot of the characters also feel superfluous because of how quick the supporting cast is growing. First episode, and this is if you're going in blind, since the pilot was about 5, we got about a main cast of 6, followed up with Adam and Loot. Next up, we've got Vox, Valentino, and Vivette. And if you don't count the pilot, you can also throw Serpentis in there as well. Third episode, Zestriel, Carmilla, and Carmilla's daughters. Technically speaking with those two. Fourth episode doesn't really introduce any new characters in it. If I'm wrong, let me know. Fifth episode, Lucifer and Mimsy.
Who the fuck are you?
And the sixth and latest at the time of me writing this, Sarah and Emily. And I'm limiting myself to the characters that have an actual connection to either the other established personalities or have a relevance to the plot. With the exception of episode 4, most episodes introduce at least 2 characters, and maybe they'll show up later, but only 2 of the previous mentioned characters, Valentino and Vivette, appear in more meaningful roles in other episodes. My biggest issue is that we're not really given a lot of breathing room when it comes to the pacing and introductions of the characters, and there are characters that I do want to like here. I find Vox as a villain is interesting, and while he does have anger issues, he does have a lot more composure than some of Viv's other villains that I will talk about. Adding new characters isn't the problem here, it's that this takes away the time to delve into the characters of the main cast. I'm not saying that the characters are flat, quite the opposite, but the problem is that, save for Angel Dust and maybe Husk, there isn't really all that much done with the characters in terms of development or personality. Well, personality might be a little too much on that. But take Charlie. Here's a question for you. Why does she believe her people should be allowed redemption? What event made her think that her people need to be saved, cause like her father says,
"Our people, Charlie,
are awful. They got gifted free will, and look what they did with it. Everything's terrible."
I just don't want you to put yourself on the line for people like that.
I want to know why Charlie feels this way, but up to this point, we don't know. Or consider the whole thing between Lucifer and Alistair, the 2 characters practically fighting each other to be a father figure to Charlie, but there isn't anything to really push Alistair wanting to be a replacement for Lucifer prior to this. Or the issues between Lucifer and Charlie that I brought up. Maybe Alistair's just trying to be a dick here, and if he is, it's still entertaining, so I like that. Still feel sad for Johnny who lost that bet to the devil when he went down to Georgia, though. I'm sure by the time this video is out, episodes 7 and 8 will be released, and maybe I'm eating crow here. And if I am, that's a good thing. And if I'm feeling up to it, I'll add an additional part at the end of this video talking about that. Fuck! That being said, however...
Who is Eric Cartman's father? Is it Chief Running Water? Or is it Chef? Or is it the 1991 Denver Broncos?
When I refer to a squandered mystery, this is more or less tying into the pacing, but also into characterization. I know that there's a fair bit out there who will say, oh, this is just you saying this is what you want. And there's a level of truth for that. But this isn't me saying that my preference is objectively better, nor am I demanding this of anyone associated with the show. Part of the reason why I'm bringing up the Angel's death as a missed opportunity is that it's just used as a motivator for the Angels, but then it's pretty much it. According to the story itself, this is the first time that an angel has been killed by a demon. That's actually a pretty big deal from what we're given. What with the culling happening every year for who knows how long, could be tens of thousands of years. It's a pretty big deal and could have been tied into the main actual cast, but it's done by a character that we know nothing about really. And I'm not saying that I want the whole story to revolve around it, but it feels like something that's a big deal that falls to the wayside. To be completely fair, later on, in episode 7, it actually does get tied to the main cast, with Alistair basically using it as a means to get a deal with Charlie. I will give credit for that, it did tie it back to the main cast, so I have to eat crow there, and hey, that's always the best thing to do. Plus, I like to be honest about this sort of stuff. I still maintain that there is a missed opportunity here, though. Okay, back to the video. This is where I get into talking about Phoenix Wright, a mystery-based series of games that, while not perfect with some of its writing, at least have competent enough to make things flow better and make you care about each individual mystery. Normally when it comes to the mystery in Phoenix Wright, the characters that we meet in the cases have some establishing moments that allow us to connect with them as characters. The game's cases allow each individual cast to settle with the audience playing it, and in some cases, Establishes characters ahead of time that can really rip out your heart when you learn that they're the true culprit for a crime. Carmilla could have been a character that fits into that mold. Possibly. After all, the reason she killed the angel was to protect herself and her daughters. That's a noble thing, even for a demon. Which, is kind of the point of the show. What was that list that Adam gave? 2 out of 3 ain't bad. But because this mystery isn't even a big deal to demons or even the main cast of the show, it subsequently makes me not care about the person who did it. The only one who actually cared was Alistair, who more than likely is going to use it as blackmail or something. But because there isn't any actual roots for characterization for Carmilla, I don't have a reason to care what happens to her either. I personally would have had the angel die at the hands of one of the hotel guests or workers. Doesn't really matter who it was. I know I said Alistair earlier, but that was just a debunked theory I had I could take with a grain of salt. And bam, you have it tied into the main cast, and hell, the audience itself can know who it is, but the characters don't. There's a famous quote from Alfred Hitchcock about a bomb under a table, where he talks about a bomb being under a table where people are having a conversation about baseball, and boom, out of nowhere the bomb goes off. It doesn't have any suspense to it. That's how I feel with the reveal of Carmilla killing the angel, because again, it comes out of nowhere. Now, if a resident of the hotel had killed the angel, not only does it provide a bit of attention to the plot because the individual was the one who essentially caused the jump in the mass genocide of demons, but as information goes out, it can cause drama since Charlie's plans have to be rushed because of it. You introduce an element to your story, it's best to have a tie into your actual main cast, especially if it has a very prominent connection to your lead, like this does. But Hazbin Hotel does not do that. Now again, I have to stress, I'm not saying that I wanted it to be this way exactly. I'm just pointing out that this is a missed opportunity for really dynamic writing.
Well, that's not very nice.
Of course not! I'm fucking evil!
Gotta be honest, vivziepop isn't all that great at making antagonists, even going back to Hell of a Boss. One of the most prominent traits that a lot of her villains tend to be is that they're obnoxious and cartoonishly evil. Looking at Maman, Crimson, and Stella as prime examples from Hell of a Boss, it's more of a blatant attempt to paint a picture on a show full of assholes that this is the asshole that we're not supposed to like. That's the case for Adam here. He's the main antagonist of the show, and he's pretty much as vulgar as the rest of the main characters in Hell. Aside from him being an angel, it doesn't really make him stand out much. And I know for a fact that someone in the comments is right now typing, Adam being a giant asshole who doesn't even know how he got into heaven shows the hypocrisy of the entire system. It's the point. I see you doing that. Stop that. Stop that terrible spelling there, Kevin. I will concede that is correct. However, there's more than one way to establish that, and make Adam stand out as an antagonist from your other antagonists. You don't need to make him to be a foul-mouthed jackass who loves to make penis jokes to get across that he's a horrible person and point out the hypocrisy of heaven. This was actually really well done in Final Fantasy X with Seymour Guado, a maester of Yevon in that world. A very high position and a powerful mage, he's courteous and polite, but deep down he's a nihilistic psychopath who's also a blatant hypocrite that can also represent the hypocrisy of Yevon. You see, in the world of FF10, people can still live after death. They're more like spirits, and if they stay too long in the living world, they become monsters that you fight in the world. And Seymour believes that death is a sweet relief from the pain of life. However, if you have 2 ears and understand how hypocrites work, Seymour is one of those spirits who lives long after he died. This isn't me saying that I want Adam to be like Seymour. My point is that you can raise the idea of heaven's hypocrisy without breaking a plank of unsubtle storytelling. Hell, Disney did this with Judge Claude Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, who was an excellent villain to expose the hypocrisy of the Holy Church, believing everything he does is under God's will despite his hypocrisy in lusting after Esmeralda and treating her people and Quasimodo with cruelty. Again, this isn't me saying that Adam needs to be a one-for-one for the villain, but because he holds a lot of traits that a lot of other villains that vivziepop has in her shows, it doesn't make Adam an interesting villain or make him stand out other than appearance. I can tell that the show is going for what's the difference between angels and sinners. Since one look at heaven, the only real difference is that it's peaceful and has pastel colors in comparison to hell. Honestly, the more intriguing villain is Vox, mainly because he has a cool and composed outer layer, but deep down he's got a more childish and angry side to him. Plus, his visual distinctive design makes him stand out more visually than the rest of the cast. TV heads will do that for you. In my humble opinion, I think Adam should have had a more holier-than-thou exterior, not be as vulgar when in public or those he's meeting with. Had a more dirty internal persona that he can be free to have. Now that's a personal preference with this, since the whole idea of heaven being corrupt that the show is going for is that it's supposed to be a great shining beacon of utopia, but underneath it can be just as, if not more corrupt so, than hell. You kinda get that with Sarah to a degree, but since we don't really have that much of an impression of her as a character, with episode 6 being the only one she's actually shown up in thus far, It's hard to really say what she's like as a character. She might be what I'm looking for in an antagonist who's a hypocrite.
I now know we are bringing misery to thousands of innocent people.
But it's a bit messy as things are, and to be frank, I've kind of seen the whole angels are the bad guy thing multiple times. And while Hazbin isn't making the entirety of Heaven's residents be painted as the elites of the afterlife, at this point in time anyway, I don't find it all that enthralling to watch. Granted, this could be due to the pacing, again, but that's just me. Now, I'm not saying that the villains are bad per se in the same way as some other villains that I've talked about on this channel, but what I am saying is that the villains in Hazbin are a bit of a mixed bag, the more major ones being a bit on the boring side, which one can argue is a bigger issue, especially for a villain character.
Oh, Stewie, it's wonderful.
Okay, see you guys later.
I mean, what the hell is it supposed to be? What a dumbass. Hey, let's spit on it.
At the end of the day, Hazbin Hotel's idea was to be a redemption story for the characters, or at least that's how it was in the trailer. Now we're pivoting into a rebellion against heaven, if I understand correctly, so we're kinda dropping the whole idea if the Hazbin Hotel would even work. It's a standard idea to raise the stakes for your hero, that's basic storytelling for a character. But because of the pacing of the show, it doesn't really feel all that earned. Am I saying that this is a bad pivot? It's hard for me to say, really. Again, the premise of the show that was brought up in the pilot was bring up the idea that sinners could get out of hell. And with that, it came with the idea of a more personal story to be talked about. And this ties back into those pacing issues that I brought up initially. Before this show was released, it was already confirmed there was going to be 2 seasons, and this kind of pivot into fighting against the unfair rules of heaven and the natural order of things does seem to be a natural turn, but doesn't feel all that cohesive since we're immediately jumping into this in the first season. I get there's limited time and you want to get through what you can, especially since deals like this can have the rug pulled underneath them. However, with an idea like this, I feel like there should have been a more personable story involving the main cast for Season 1 and including the Overlords, since it has a connection to a few of the characters in the hotel. We're supposed to care for these characters, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who do, but the episodes don't let you breathe with the characters. There's a combination of too much information and yet at the same time not enough for some other characters. I've brought this up before, but what compels Charlie to want to save her people? Yeah, it's sad that Charlie's people have to die, but she's a natural born demon. Why does she care about the sinners? I'm not saying that all motivations for characters need to be revealed in the first season, but there has to be a reason for why I need to care for these characters and why they do the things they do. Now, I could totally be overthinking this. I'm not saying that the pivot is bad, but this isn't exactly the most desirable way to tell a story of redemption. Which, is it even a story about redemption now? It's more of a row, fight the power. That sort of story isn't a bad one to transition to, but it should have been reserved for Season 2. By the time you guys are seeing this video, episodes 7 and 8 are out, and as I promised earlier in the video, I'd talk about them and see if my thoughts on the series changed before the ending of it. So, one more spoiler for everyone, since I am talking about the ending. Ultimately, my thoughts don't really change with these 2 episodes. I don't see Adam as a great antagonist, and the conflict gets even convoluted with a single exchange.
Angelic weapons? It's that simple? How has no one else figured this out?
What?
Just because you point out the flawed logic in your series, that doesn't make it a clever observation. It's been 10,000 years according to Lucifer. How come no one has ever tried this before? And that even goes for Lucifer as well. We're shown that he's more than a match for Adam in a fight, so why wasn't this done before? I get that Lucifer was pretty much beaten down, but when you have so much time between this and the prologue, it raises so many questions and ultimately brings up plot holes. Of course, anything can have plot holes, and how much of an issue that is for you and your enjoyment is going to be dependent on the person. However, it does raise questions for me. Like, why haven't the demons tried to raise up against the angels before? How did the demons even get their hands on the first angelic weapons in the first place? We're told that angels are supposed to be near impossible to kill with the exception of their own weapons, so that would mean it's near impossible for a demon to get an angelic weapon. So how the hell did they get the first one acquired? Did the angels just use one spear per demon and just leave them there? What are they, stupid? Apparently so, and especially when you consider that in the pilot we see demons picking up their weapons apparently, so again, I must ask, why haven't the demons used these weapons to take out Heaven's exterminators before? Oh, and is the table a holy weapon? Of course, what I also have an issue with is that the pacing strikes again, and this time it affects the characters even worse. The biggest example would be episode 6 that had the revelation that Vaggie was a fallen angel, and we're told for the first 3 years that she and Charlie were together. Not once had Vaggie disclosed that information, especially considering that Vaggie had previously killed countless demons and learning that was supposed to be a soul-crushing event. That's good character drama and could lead to some good conflict amongst the cast. However, whatever payoff we get is rushed. Honestly, I was kind of over a scene where Charlie would lose her shit over Vaggie for lying to her for 3 years, but nope. Any tension or character confliction that would have been done for this is immediately resolved in the next episode. I'm not saying this kind of thing can't work. I watch Kamen Rider, a series that is known to set up conflict in one episode and have it be resolved in the next, but that usually stems to either side characters only show up once in a while, or they have a basic setup from previous episodes for specific characters to add to their stories. So, yeah, these 2 episodes didn't really change my issues with the series. If anything, they only highlighted the issues more for me, or in some cases made them worse, especially when you apply some of the loosest scrutiny to the plot. I want to make it clear that if you're just here for entertainment value, you can ignore these issues, and that's good for you. As a critic, I really can't ignore these elements, but don't get me twisted. There's a lot to enjoy with this series and with these 2 episodes, but I wouldn't say they save the series from its issues. Although it was funny to get this reaction at the end of it all.
Congratulations!
And hey, there's at least some decent stuff for the next season with Lilith showing up. Alright, back to the actual video.
The cartoon's finished, Ren. Would you like to see it?
I don't want anyone to get it twisted that I hate this show, cause I don't. I think Hazbin Hotel, despite its flaws and some of the choices it makes with writing, has a certain charm to it, as well as representing the creative endeavors that an indie project can do on its own. Its creator I don't really want to talk about, but that's neither here nor there. Plus, I'm a sucker for Keith David's voice.
You're a loser, baby.
God, it's like I'm back in my childhood with that voice. Only with swearing, because you know it's mature with that.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
And I make these critiques not to tear down the show, or nor to say that it's objectively bad. These are things that bug me personally when it comes to it. And I need to stress that I'm not looking to take away people's enjoyment of this series. That's not the point of my videos. The point is to express my opinions, and for some reason people like to listen to me, some throw money at me. I like to think I'm a well-adjusted individual. Look, I know for a fact that even if I deliver these criticisms, there's nothing that I can really do about the show. I'm just a YouTuber with almost 200k subscribers. Does my word have any sort of sway on people? Maybe, but I doubt I could cause such a change for a show that's already in development and projections that I have no idea to control. So why make this video? I don't know, because it's fun, because I find it entertaining, gives me an excuse to be a goofball on the net. Whatever the case, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you disagree with my takes in this, I want to say don't let me or anyone else take away your fun. So long as you're not pushing your views or being annoying, you have every right to enjoy whatever you want, regardless if I think it's flawed. And there are good things about Hazbin Hotel. The songs are actually rather entertaining, and I do think a good chunk of the designs of the characters are good. Voice acting is a little hit and miss at points, but that's just a nitpick. But for me, it's more or less weighed down by the express lane that the plot is in. But that's enough out of me. I'm gonna go jump in a ditch. Bye bye!